everybody, welcome back to my channel and Blind Reviews. This very long video is a Valentine's Day special and I'll be reviewing The Kiss Quotient. Yes, I know it's a very long one, but I had a lot to say on this book. Not necessarily bad, it's actually a pretty positive review that I have for this book, but I had a lot to say and a lot of things, so bear with me through this really long video. It actually reminds me that someone actually mentioned in one of my comments, I think in one of my reviews for The Bridge Kingdom, that they were hoping for me to do a long overview of a series with or of anything with spoilers and everything. Well, I've done it a couple of times, but I keep forgetting to acknowledge that comment, and I'm just going to say, well, this is it. This is your long overview of things. This review does contain some broad spoilers. I believe, if I remember correctly, honestly, I didn't listen to the full review because it's a lot to listen to, and I recorded for about 2 to 3 hours that day, so it was very long. So other things I want to say is that there are some content warnings through this book that I do want to give. I believe I addressed them in the review, but I can't quite remember. And said content warnings are harassment, controlling behavior, and assault. And when it comes to the assault, I don't mean like explicit sexual assault. There is an explicit forced kiss in the book. So that So that is something to be aware of when you read. Also, this review has an accompanying blog post on my website, which I will link below. But if you are interested, definitely subscribe to my to my blog, where I will be discussing, well, where I have book reviews, and I will also have creative writing that I release as often as I can. So check that out. Also subscribe to my channel if you're interested in my content. I release videos very often, and to be aware when I release videos, turn on notifications. And with that, back to the very long, regularly scheduled program of The Kiss Quotient. So, last Valentine's Day, I reviewed a bad romance book called The Spanish Love Deception. My review was about 30 minutes long, and I explained everything that was wrong with it in my opinion. Because this is my opinion. There are other people who outright love this book. If you look on, last I checked on Goodreads, it's one of those books that is kind of polarizing, but I've seen a bunch of positive reviews on it last year, and people really loved it. One of the reasons I specifically read it was because one of my favorite booktubers, Irish Reader, had really good things to say about it, and he was very excited when he read it. He thought it was great. So that was actually what got me to read it. And then I was definitely disappointed. It was the first book of 2022 for me, and it was a 1-star. And I don't remember if I mentioned it in the review, but it was a repetition of 2021 in a way, because the year before I read 2 books that were disappointing that also seemed to be good because of a booktuber I watched who seemed to really enjoy them. And while I would still recommend this book for certain areas, I don't think it's necessarily the best book. And I started with giving, I think, 1 star, and I gave The Spanish Love Deception in the beginning of the year 1 star. But I decided this year, why not change the tradition and review a good book for Valentine's Day? You know, there's no need to be negative. There's no need to be completely negative in the day of love and friendship, right? So I decided, let's review a good, or mostly good, because this was mostly good, I have my critiques, romance book for Valentine's Day. And by the way, if you hear some noises, I am going to be playing with my fidget spinner while I am recording, because I recently watched a video that kind of explains some of the things I feel, and I try not to... Okay, I gotta stop myself from rocking, but also I need some stimulation. I explain it in a vlog at some point, so you will see it. There is something about, it is for stimulation purposes, and so that I don't feel fidgety. So I am going to be playing with my fidget spinner. So if you're hearing, if I don't know if it'll get caught in the microphone, but yeah, I will be playing with my fidget spinner. That way I'm not playing with my Brono and you don't hear all the keyboard noises and stuff like that. So it's not distracting. So yeah, I also want to start with saying right off the bat by giving a content warning. I will be briefly mentioning this in the video, and I will give a second content warning when I am, like a second verbal content warning. But in the book, there is harassment, assault in the form of forced kissing. So there's sexual assault in the form of forced kissing. And there is also possessive behavior when it comes to the male the male love interest. So I did want to mention this now. I will be talking about briefly, not all of them, but I will be talking about the well, actually no, I'll be talking about all of them because of the way that it turned out in the book, and it'll be part of my critiques. So I will briefly be talking about it, but I will be mentioning when I am going to start talking about them. That way that you're prepared and you can skip as much as you need to. Take care of yourselves, okay? That's important. So let's start with reading this description, because as you can see from the title, I am reviewing The Kiss Quotient by Helen Hoang, which I've actually been meaning to read for years. I think I had it in my iPad for some time now. So I have been meaning to read it for years. So I finally have. Okay. A heartwarming and refreshing debut novel that proves one thing. There's not enough data in the world to predict what will make your heart tick. Stella Lane thinks math is the only thing that unites the universe. She comes up with algorithms to predict customer purchases, a job that has given her more money than she knows what to do with, and way less experience in the dating department than the average 30-year-old. It doesn't help that Stella has Asperger's, and French kissing reminds her of a shark getting its teeth cleaned by pilot fish. Her conclusion? She needs lots of practice with a professional, which is why she hires escort Michael. Hold on. Which is why she hires escort Michael Fan, the Vietnamese and Swedish stunner can't afford to turn down Stella's offer and agrees to help her check off all the boxes on her lesson plan. From foreplay to more than missionary position. Before long, Stella not only learns to appreciate his kisses, but to crave all the other things he's making her feel. Soon their no-nonsense partnership starts making a strange kind of sense, and the pattern that emerges will convince Stella that love is the best kind of logic. Okay, so I just remembered, I think another, I will be, actually, no, I don't think there's another content warning. I thought this was another content warning, but for the video, but no, I don't think it is. I'll if there is, I'll just let you know. So I will say I read this book in 2 days. I read it in 2 days. I remember specifically that it was the beginning of the week, and I read it in 2 days. So I definitely enjoyed it. And before I continue, by the way, I want to say there is a blog post accompanying this video. So yeah, definitely I'll link it in the description because they'll both be out. Or it's out today. So I'll link my blog in the description. But if anything, I'll try to link the I'll try to link the I'll try my best to link it before, but I don't think I'll be able to. But you know what? Uh, it'll be out today. That way, when definitely look in my blog for this review. I for this written review. I go really in depth on certain things. So yeah. Anyway, so I enjoyed this book a lot. It was really, really good. I enjoyed it. For the most part, it's good. It just it's great. So let's see. The prose is good. It's actually really, really easy, really accessible to read, really very easy. The themes, the pacing, also kind of works. I do have my critiques on this pacing. I think I mentioned it in the review. I have to look back at it, but the pacing, something is always happening. Now, I've mentioned before that there are pros and cons to this, in my opinion. As a reader, there are pros and cons to fast pacing. Pro, something is always happening. You have no reason to like worry that nothing's gonna happen. You can, as a reader, it's very easy for me to follow because it's fast pacing, meaning something's always happening. There's no need to be like, okay, nothing's happening in this chapter, you know. Something is always happening on every page. It's the kind of page turning pacing. Iron Widow had a similar pacing, and I had issues with it. So, and I do have the same issues with this book in that way, in the pacing, because it is very fast paced. So there is really no time to slow down and get to and breathe and get to kind of be alone with the characters. There are moments when it does, but there's no time where it's just like a, you know, like a filler chapter or something. I mean, I know that people tend to say no to filler, but I don't mind. So, but like, there's no time where it's just there's mainly no time where it's just slower. There is, I will say, however, that the author did manage to use fast pace and still have three-dimensional characters and develop them well enough, I think, in my opinion. So that is the one thing I will grant, that while the pacing is not the best, I think that they still manage to give uh give us three-dimensional characters and give us more time, give us time to get to know them, because it's written in both point of views. um so at least that is good. Now I'm gonna lump themes and characters kind of together in a way, because there are things I kind of want to talk about. I'm gonna try to keep, I don't want to make this video super long, because honestly a lot of what I wrote I don't think I can remember off memory, but I'm gonna do my best to make it work. So basically, there are really interesting themes in this book I find really interesting. Some better done than others. We'll talk about that part when we get to the characters. Well, actually, no, not even. That's not. Even, I don't know if you would consider it a theme. That's just things that happen. But some things are better than others in this book. But the themes in general are great. They bring a lot of interesting uh, conversations to have, which is why I am going to be talking about disability representation in this video. I don't usually talk about it a lot. I can't speak for other disabilities, by the way. Just keep that in mind. I can only speak to my experience as a blind person and my experience with representation and my thoughts on it. Generally, however, disability representation is not necessarily always good. They have some general stereotypes. That's the thing. So I'm going to talk about it this way. So when it comes to disability representation, it is usually very stereotyped. Some of the general stereotypes when it comes to disability kind of stay the same in the stories I have personally seen. And that would be that the person that the disabled the character with a disability has usually they have no personality, no identity or life outside of their disability. They're very they're suffering in their disability. They We get the struggle story, and in this struggle story, it's usually a pretty exaggerated struggle if we're being honest. Sometimes, or the ones I have seen is it's usually an exaggerated kind of struggle. The ones I have seen, be aware of this. Um, Usually they are very dependent on other people while being praised for being independent, for doing the bare minimum. They If there is a cure, able-bodied characters will encourage them to get the cure, or in order for them to have apparently quote unquote more of a life, more so they can make their life happen, or the disabled character will eventually get the cure because they need to be fixed and they're broken and they feel broken. So in any case, they usually have very low self-esteem, but once their disability is cured, they have a life, and they have character, and they have higher self-esteem. And usually when they're disabled, they're also put in a very high pedestal because they do the bare minimum. It's kind of like when I read a book and someone's just like, "Oh my god, I can't believe you read that book." That entire book, and I'm just like, yeah, I read the book. Except not always like this, but like um that it's not like that. I'm actually giving you guys an exaggeration, but usually what happens is when people when my mom or someone else tells people, "Oh yeah, she cooks, she does the dishes, she sweeps and mops the house," everybody is weirdly shocked over the fact that I'm blind and I clean and do dishes and do all the regular stuff. They're like, she does her laundry, she cleans up. Everybody's weirdly shocked about it. And they're like, "Oh my god, she's so independent." This is adulting, right? I hope you know this is called adulting. Whether you're disabled or able-bodied, it's called adapting/adulting. I don't know what there is to be impressed about, but some people for some reason are heavily impressed over the fact that I do things like this. So yeah, so these are things, right? So this kind of representation is ableist and infantilizing. I talk about this in a later review for Baby Teeth, which is going to come out in June, but I'm going to talk about it now. Listen, there is such thing, there is such thing as intentional and unintentional ableism, and I'm going to go into that in a minute. But first, I want to talk about the models of disability because it kind of fits into this representation. This kind of ableist representation is, I have a theory about it. So, but there are in general two models of disability. There's a social, and then there's the medical model of disability. The social model of disability suggests that society is the problem, that we are not, and that society needs to change to accommodate not just us, but everybody. In this case, society needs to be more accessible to everybody, and it needs to be able to accommodate everyone, whether you are able bodied or not. I do talk a little bit about this in a blog post that I wrote, so I will link that blog post below in my description. That way you can read it. So I am going, but I am going to explain social model disability changes. Some of these changes are actually, I don't think they're super noticeable changes. They can be like really little changes, like having a ramp and accessible elevators, having braille signs that tell you where you are, having accessible bathrooms, having accessible websites, having, even, I'd argue that even like audio description is a form. Audio description and closed captions are a um, are a part of these changes society can make, and these are changes that um, I personally don't take for granted, but they're easy changes to implement because they're not they are It's accessible for everybody, and it is a right. Accessibility, by the way, is not just a necessity, and it's not something that a company can decide whether to or not to do it, whether to do it or not do it. It is a right that every person has to have things accessible, disabled or not. This is a right. So when a show doesn't, for example, have audio description, you are depriving many viewers that are blind and visually. You're basically depriving your blind and visually impaired audiences of knowing what the visual cues are. You're taking away a right that is rightfully ours. So that is the social model of disability. The medical model of disability, on the other hand, is in the extreme of negative because it suggests that society does not need to do that society can stay the same, and that we need to, uh, that society needs to, that society is the one that that we need to be the ones to compromise and basically do what we are the ones that kind of need to do whatever we can to, I guess, accommodate to whatever society needs and kind of go along with it, that there needs to be no change. It goes further and suggests that we that we need to be fixed, that we need to be cured because we are permanently broken. And this is where a lot of the representation of disability, the negative representation, um, seems to derive from. That is my theory. That it seems to derive from the medical model of disability and their negative stereotyping. So usually, like, the stereotypes and all that stuff seems to be part of this model of disability, and it evolves into very negative representation where you usually have the struggle story or inspiration porn. If you are unaware, inspiration porn is it is a phrase coined by Stella Young that that means the objectification of people with disabilities. She has a great TED Talk. I'm linking it below. Everybody should watch it. It's so good. So yeah, we get inspiration porn and we get these negative and stereotyped representations, not to mention ableism. And as I talked about earlier, there is intentional and unintentional ableism, in my opinion. So intentional ableism, what I call intentional ableism, is it comes from people who are educated, who know a little bit about disability, or enough at least about disability, but still choose to be ableist. A good example of this would be people say, I've never really had this necessarily, but like your teacher, your TBI or teacher for the blind and visually impaired, telling you can't do something based on your blindness or something in that form. It's about the fact that people who would normally know are educated in disability are still kind of ableist and infantilizing. But I do have an example of this, though. A really good example of this is it has happened to me in this way, where when I went to when I went to community college before I transferred to university, there was a person in the disability service office, and they were at the time, I don't know about them now, but they were the coordinators. They were the coordinator of the office, and there were a lot of people with disabilities in that in there were a lot of people with disabilities, of course, in that office, and they coordinated the entire department. And when certain subjects were brought up to her, the way that I keep saying she, I'm trying to leave it ambiguous, but I already just said she. Whatever. I'm gonna try again. It happens. My terminology goes away. But any certain subjects that were brought up to them, they would try to um, minimize it, and they constantly infantilized people with disabilities, and they minimized it. They tried to soften the blow. They did everything possible to kind of infantilize in a way, and almost take and not validate the problems in there that the people were saying about. That is a form of ableism, and quite frankly, I consider it intentional, because you know better and you work with people with disabilities. I consider that kind of ableism intentional. Unintentional ableism is kind of the hardest one to sometimes, in my opinion, it's kind of sometimes hard to 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 um to like pinpoint, because unintentional ableism is done by everyday people. This is the kind of people that maybe don't necessarily know about disabilities and how they affect your lives or anything like that. They don't know anything about disabilities, and they unintentionally infantilize you. They unintentionally invalidate you. They talk to you like you're a child. They do things with the intention of being helpful. And this is the worst kind, because some people don't actually realize that it's that they're doing that to other people. Um, a really good example of unintentional ableism is when so when I go out to with able-bodied people, what will happen? Let's say let's put the scenario at a restaurant, but this can happen anywhere. This has happened to me in doctors' offices. This has happened in the bank. This has happened this has happened in several places. But the way it works is, let's say I go to a restaurant with an able-bodied person. When they're asking about orders, like, hey, what do you want to order? They would be like, since I am so perceived female and I don't really correct people because I get irritated and I don't need everybody to know everything. So what happens is they'll be like, so what does she want to order? They'll they will, instead of delivering their question to me like, so what would you like to order? It'll be like, what would she like? That is a form of unintentional ableism. It is degrading and humiliating. There's no reason for you to do that. Also a good example of that is, I will link this story below. But basically, if you remember, about a year ago when I was on vacation in Dominican Republic, I mentioned that I yelled at an airline agent because when I told them that I needed an escort and stuff like that I don't need a wheelchair, he went right ahead and kind of ignored me and just asked my aunt, does she need a wheelchair? And I'm like, I just told you what I needed. And the only reason he started talking to me is because I yelled at him. So that is another form of what I think is intentional ableism. I'm sorry, not unintentional ableism, not intentional, but unintentional. It's possible that he didn't really mean anything bad about it. I have so many examples of unintentional ableism, including the math professor that did not talk to me for a month in my math class. I'll tell that story later, because I know guys, it exists. And this is one of those things, right? So I wanted to discuss negative representation so that I can praise the positive representation of disability in this story. It is so good. This is the ideal. The KISS quotient is the ideal disability representation. It is very much just, it's like, okay, so it is a part of Stella's character, but it is not her entire life. Yes, it affects her life in certain ways, but it doesn't define who she is. Her disability in the book is literally there. It exists, and it is wonderful because all it does is it exists. There's nothing explained to you as the reader, and I love it because I don't think you as the reader need an explanation of the things that are with people's disabilities. Honestly, you don't need it as the reader. And if you want certain education on someone's disability, you know what you do? You do this thing. It is called consult non-fiction sources. Fiction is not meant to teach you what my disability looks like. Fuck No. I appreciated the lack of explanations in this book so much. I needed that. I needed that so much. Like, good disability rep is hard to come by. I can think of a few books that I think give really, really good representation of this. I have a few stories, not even just books. I have a few stories in general that give really, really good disability representation. And I appreciate those stories so much because good disability rep is very hard to come by. It's like it doesn't exist, and I just feel so, and I was so happy to read good disability representation. And it's amazing. It's amazing. It's so good to read good disability rep. I don't know if this is accurate to autism, by the way. I don't know if it's accurate to autism. I'm talking about just a general disability representation, the general writing of it. If whether it is or isn't accurate to people with autism, you should find out by, and unfortunately I can't link any of these below because I do not know any, finding reviews from people who are autistic. That is the best way that you could gauge if this is accurate or not. I suggest spending your time, and I suggest taking your time and spending it on finding out whether it's, if you want to know if it's accurate representation of them, whether finding out if it through other people. But do remember that autism is on a spectrum. It is not. I mean, disability in general, I feel, is on a spectrum. But I will say about autism, do remember that it is on a spectrum. And if you find one reviewer, if you met one autistic person and you find like one review by a person who is autistic and you're just like, okay, so it's probably this and this and this, and you think it's wrong, please know you've only met one person with this disability. You can't gauge whether something is good representation all the time with disability by assuming it is because someone tells you it is. Just like one person. It's important to know that disability representation is subjective to the reviewer. It is very subjective to the viewer, to the critic, to whoever is watching. And I'm saying this because I am going to talk about a couple of things later that were mentioned in some reviews I read, and I covered a YouTube review even I watched. And I want to say it's subjective representation because, listen, representation cannot please everybody, okay? And because it cannot please everybody, some people might think it's good representation, some people might think it's bad representation. So be aware of that. Disability representation also lies on a spectrum, and you don't know for everything. So please be aware of that. Okay? Thank you. But generally, the way it's written, the way that nothing is explained, the way that it just exists and you kind of have to deal with it kind of thing, is great. It's great because it's not even it's a part of her life, but it's not everything in her life. And I appreciate that kind of writing. It's the kind of writing I strive for. It made me consider some parts of my writing as well, because I'm blind, so I write blind main characters. And I write from my own experiences. Recently, for example, I wrote a short story for class, and I'm still editing it, called The Voice in My Dreams, and the main character Eve is blind, and a lot of her experiences are colored by my experiences. But also I try to represent as best as I can what my experience has been like, but I'm writing based on my experience. It is also worth mentioning that according to a review, this is an Own Voices book. Apparently, the author uh, seems to have autism. I do not know if this is true. At least one review, I think over the reviews I read on Goodreads, at least one of them mentioned that this is correct. However, I don't know if this is true, so I don't want to be quoted because this may not be correct information. If you want to know, just do your research. I did not do any research. I don't When I review books, I don't do author research because I'm not basing my review on the author, if their own voices or not or whatever. So, if you want to know, just do your own research on it. But from what I from what I read in the review mentioned, at least one review mentioned that the author is autistic and that this is an own voices story. So I thought it was worth mentioning, but again, I don't know how correct this is. I don't you if I did not confirm this, and I will be honest about it. I did not confirm this, so I don't know how correct this is. Um so yeah, the theme of the way that this was presented here, I love the general writing. Again, I have to praise it. It's amazing. It's the way it should be written. There should be nothing explained to you because honestly, no, no. Kind of like like nobody owes you their sexuality, nobody owes you their disability, nobody owes you an education on disability, and I feel comfortable enough saying that half the time when I write, I just put in disability terms and I don't explain them. I really don't. If you want to find out, feel free to ask, but I just don't. I don't do it. I don't do it. It's too I'm not there. I know that readers won't know what it is, but it is something the character knows. And that's fine. That's perfectly okay. So, that's a thing. It invites some interesting conversations to me. And after watching a Molly Burke video, I was especially angry about one of the scenes in this book. So, there's a scene in the book. It basically invites conversation, in my opinion, on like society appropriate or society like conforming or like what is that word? Society not even appropriate. It's kind of like it's like something that society might be looking like people, not even society, but like people might just be looking down on for a reason or another. And this was very interestingly represented by Michael. I got so mad at him for this. I'm mad at him for other reasons too in this book, but this angered me. This angered me. So there is a scene. So Stella usually, to give you some context, in the story, Stella likes to. By the way, this is not a big spoiler, so don't worry about it. Stella usually makes like she has her routines. She's happy with her routines, and also for her lesson plan, she literally wrote an actual lesson plan and has like a list of things and everything, and she has like the boxes and the way she interprets things is not the way Michael would interpret them. And she basically writes in, like, for example, in her lesson plan, when there's always a performance review thing, after some pushback, I guess, from Michael, she writes something like for Stella, because it's a review for her. If it wasn't clear, she decided to write it. So, she writes her lists and stuff like that. And one of the things that she does is she fidgets and she drums her fingers. She does things to kind of sometimes calm her down or just and things like that, right? And there is a scene in this story where Michael mentions being very irritated by her lists and constant fidgeting, and I was so mad. I was like, "Excuse me, sir? Sir, I do not fucking care if you are irritated by her fidgeting. Leave her alone. If she is fidgeting, she has her reasons, and you have no reason to be irritated because last I checked, you're not the one fidgeting. Damn it. I don't care if you are irritated. I got mad because I am someone who fidgets. I am someone who I love my routines too. I'm someone who also has a routine. Sometimes I write lists here and there of things I might need to accomplish. I don't do it all the time, but I do it sometimes. But in general, I fidget. I'm playing with a fidget spinner right now so I can minimize some of my fidgeting. I'm rocking on my rocking chair and I can't always stay still even for a video because it is hard for me to do that. And the reason I fidget personally is because I need stimulation. And this is a good way to stimulate me. So I got very angry, but I'm going to explain this too. One of the things too is that stimulation comes in several forms for me. I also talk about this in a vlog where, because I've recently watched this Molly Burke video about 10 unexpected ways that blindness affects the physical body, and one of those ways is fidgeting. A lot of blind people will like sit when they're standing, like they will rock back and forth or from side to side and things like that. They'll do different things. I am someone who relates to that. When I am standing still for not even a long time, usually a minute or two, I start rocking back and forth. I start shifting my weight. When I talk to a friend, I will constantly be typing. I used to a lot. I don't do it often anymore, but I used to twist the fabric of my shirt. I used to, like, when I was sitting in a chair that wasn't a rocking chair, I would mimic the rocking, so I would like move back and forth in the chair. I eventually stopped doing that, but that was something I used to do. For the record, I've liked rocking chairs since I was a kid. I spent a lot of time in my aunt's balcony just sitting in this rocking chair, in her rocking chair, rocking back and forth. And I have found that the rocking chair kind of minimizes my need to fidget because I'm getting stimulation with the movement. So I do that. I have done a lot of this stuff. The fidget spinner is helpful because I am playing with a toy. I'm also someone who will listen to my friend's conversation and will be typing on my braille note or doing other things at the same time because multitasking helps me get stimulation. Wait, hold on, you guys. I need to open the door. Oh, wait, never mind. My cousin is there. I was about to open the door. But basically, I am someone who fidgets a lot, right? I do a lot of fidgeting. I need. Oh, hold on a minute, guys. Let me. Hold on a minute. Okay, so I was gone for a couple of minutes, but for you guys, it'll be a second. But anyway, yeah, I am someone who fidgets a lot. I am someone who fidgets a lot. And the fidget spinner is actually kind of helping me right now actually stay still while I'm recording this video to a point. So the fidget spinner is helpful. So I got mad at the scene because I personally relate to this, the idea of fidgeting. And I know that for some people it can be irritating. And I'm here going, like, listen, it may not be what you consider society conforming or appropriate, but the thing is that people do sometimes fidget for whatever reason or another. So I got irritated by this. And you know what irritates me the most about this scene? This crap was never acknowledged. This man's audacity for bullshit was never acknowledged. Listen, I got in my feelings when it came to this scene. I got angry about it. So it does bring up that kind of conversation for me, especially after watching that Molly Burke video. I'll link it below, by the way. I think it's important for people to have an idea about it, because it's important. Listen, whatever side of things doesn't really matter about this stuff, because this is something that affects us. It affects people differently, and I'm someone who fidgets all the time, and I get it. The stimulation is necessary. For me, it seems to be, from what Molly Burke said, it seems to be because of we're missing that visual stimulation. So we try to get stimulation from when other things. So one of the things that well, actually no, I don't know if that's the case, but like, you know, I when I do stuff, anything in general, it's usually so like oh wait, I remember where I left off too. Is I was gonna say something about classes. In classes, like, I'm gonna say it now, but like in classes, you know, with this with my fidgeting, and everything. So like in classes, I will multitask because it makes it easier to get. I was saying that it. I just remember my lap because I lost my train of thought after not recording for a time. I lost my train of thought. But the point about this is that like usually when I multitask and do several things at a time, it helps me get stimulation. One of the things that I I used to do this in class all the time, and I still do it to this day, just not always the same. So what I do is I will be doing other things while class is happening sometimes while I'm listening. So for example, I have like a notes document open, and then I'll have like my like a short story that I'm writing, or I'll have my file open, and I'll have a book that I'm currently reading also open in another place. I'll have the file open, and I have it like Google open where I just do some random internet searching. I used to go as far as reading I go as far as reading episode recaps, Netflix descriptions of a series I'm currently watching. Like they have like a description for each episode, so I would read those. I have read fan fiction to pay attention in class and feel stimulated. The options are endless. So that is one of those things. I got annoyed that this was not acknowledged as well. Besides that, I got annoyed that he has the audacity to think this, but I mean, I guess people can think about it, but like to like say, "Oh my god, this irritates me," without like barely knowing Stella, and then it irritated me so much about like it just irritated me. But the fact that it was never acknowledged, well, it kind of was acknowledged, but like not really, in my opinion. So yeah, and it also brought in finally the conversation of disability disclosure. Now, a lot of the time when I hear about disability disclosure, the things that they talk about are usually professional settings, like colleges and work places. So usually disclosure comes up in these settings. However, Stella does not disclose her disability to Michael. Michael kind of finds out through his cousin Quan, who found out when they were at a club. Some spoiler, but barely. These broad spoilers are a thing. You know what? I'm just gonna make a note to put this in the beginning of the video so that you know. He finds out at the club because she got overstimulated. So basically, he does not disclose she doesn't disclose the disabilities. When he finds out, he feels slightly bad in certain areas. He's like, oh wow, so that like he starts the way I feel like it was kind of acknowledged that he did all this stuff is that to a point he acknowledges like why she did some of the things that he did. And this is where I want to bring up, by the way, before I continue my disclosure conversation, this is where I want to bring up something a reviewer actually brought up. One of the things that a reviewer brought up is that, okay, so in context, Quan has a brother who is Michael's cousin. Quan, yeah, okay. He has a Quan and his brother Kai is also autistic, and one of the things that this reviewer brought up is I don't know how he wouldn't know since he has an autistic cousin. Let me explain this to you. I'm no expert in autism. I'm explaining it in a general disability belief. Or not belief, I'm sorry. In a general disability thing. But also, in the little that I know about autism, and the one thing I know is that it is a spectrum, so everybody kind of behaves differently. And it is not, even in blindness, and there are disabilities that fall into a spectrum. Like blindness is a spectrum. 9 out of 10 people who are in the blind and visually impaired community have some visually impaired, which means they have some remaining vision left. And then which is about 90%, and the last 10%, that one being like people are totally blind. So it is a spectrum. This is how he probably did not realize. And just because you have in general, just because you know someone with a disability and they have similar behaviors, I personally do not believe this is a good marker to judge if someone else has the same disability. So when the reason he wouldn't have known, it's also like, you can't You can't be looking for that. It's not a good marker to be like, let's say the scenario is that someone's met me, then they meet someone else that's blind and or somewhat blind, and it is explained eventually. Like maybe they assume based on some of the behaviors of the person might be blind. It's like, no, I'm not blind. I can see here and like some or whatever, right? So it's not a good marker to judge. It's not a good marker to use to find to see if someone is disabled or not. That's a bad marker because disability in general is a spectrum. Disability can be a spectrum. You have people of many different disabilities, and while I don't know everything about disability, I do, from what I understand it to be, it is a spectrum. Autism is a spectrum, blindness is a spectrum. Like those are the two ones I know that are spectrum. And because they're in a spectrum, you can't take a certain behaviors and assume that they because they fall in this category. I will say this, I have said it before and I will say it again. If you have met one person with a disability, you have met one person with a disability. I said it before about blind people too. If you've met a person who's blind, you've met one person who is blind. Just because they have a disability, it does not mean that they're going to behave the same way. Do not take mainstream disability representation of any kind to be truthful or accurate, no matter how much I may say it's accurate. Don't take it that way. Instead, the right thing to do would be, if possible, if you want to learn about it, to do your research. Maybe find content from other people who have that same disability that's being represented. But do not take it to be accurate necessarily when you see it, because depending on what you're watching, it could be a very watching or reading or whatever, it could be a stereotyped representation. In stereotype representations of disability tend to send negative messages to the audience. So please be aware that this is happening. So yeah, that's what I wanted to mention. So Stella does not disclose it, and the reason that Stella doesn't disclose her disability is because labels, the moment that it is labeled, she thinks she might be treated differently, which fair, because it also talks a little bit about that. It is fair to say that when you disclose your disability, it's likely that you're going to be treated differently because now there's a label to why you act a certain way. So it is fair to say that you're going to be treated differently. And most of the time, this is the case. When I remember very clearly disclosing my disability before an interview to a job, and they were like, we'll call you back. Guess what? They never called me back. So it is fair to assume that you're going to be treated differently. It's a fair assumption because the likelihood of you not being treated differently is pretty low. And that's generally because people have a specific belief of disability. They have a specific view. If you have a disability, people have a view of who you should be and what you should be like. And because they have this specific view and belief, they don't necessarily always treat you like everybody else. So it is a fair assumption to assume this will be the case, and she doesn't disclose it. And while he found out and treated her mainly the same, I still think that Stella was right. And I like the fact that this brought the conversation of disability disclosure in personal life, not necessarily just in work life. Because, again, like no one owes you their sexuality, nobody owes you their disability. And I appreciated that the author wrote something where they did not disclose their disability in person. They just kind of went along with it because they didn't know that they didn't understand or know the difference. It's a good thing to know, and I feel like it is important to mention. I'll mention it in a minute about the job, but disclosing your disability should feel like something you want to do. You know, I'm blind in my channel because I have said I'm blind, and the reason I did it was because I'm very comfortable with disability, but also If I was doing something else, if I was applying for a job, for example, I don't disclose my disability. In the application process, they don't ask me what my disability is because they can't ask you, but I don't usually. I think I disclosed before in an application that I had disability because I think they say, um, you have a disability, yes or no. I don't remember if there was an option of not disclose, would rather not disclose, but I think there usually is an option for would rather not disclose most of the time. But when you disclose your disability, either in personal or professional settings, it should be in a way that you feel comfortable doing. If you don't feel comfortable disclosing your disability, then do not. It needs to be, in my opinion, in my personal opinion, it needs to be something that you want to do because you feel comfortable doing. That said, disclosing your disability, especially in a professional setting, in a personal setting, well, not so much, but in a professional setting, disclosing your disability could be good. Now, when is up to you, but disclosing your disability in a professional setting is, I would consider it to be good just because you would make certain that you get all the accommodations that you need, and this is more specifically like work or school. So, for example, disclosing my disability at the, I could have actually not disclosed this when I went to school, but disclosing my disability in the for the disability resource center at my school allowed me to get accommodations like, extra time on tests. I get like double time. I am allowed to use a computer. I am allowed to use my braille note in class and for test taking, I believe. I'm allowed to use a screen reader. I'm allowed to, one of the recent accommodations, for example, although I do try to format as best as I can, one of the accommodations I have is, um, I have, I can, I will not be graded based on visual content because I cannot see it. So, things like that. These are things that, that because I disclose my disability, I have access to as an accommodation. So, yes, disclosing in a professional setting, if you feel like you're gonna need it, it would be useful to make sure you get all the accommodations you need in that area. So keep that. I would say that in mind. Now, when disclosing your disability, especially for jobs, I want you to know, in case you don't, but I think this is important for you to know. Legally, you can disclose your disability whenever you like in the job process. And legally, they cannot ask you about your disability. They cannot ask you, for example, one of the questions that was asked, I did not know this until the professor asked me, and then my advisor was like, you're not supposed to ask that. Like, legally, we can't tell you that. And one of the things that one of our professors asked me is, can you see anything? Do you have light perception? I was happy to say, no, I don't. But my advisor did say, you cannot ask that. Legally, you cannot ask that. So you in a job, they cannot ask you what your in an application that I've seen, they usually don't ask you. They usually cannot ask you, from what I understanding, what your disability is, and they cannot ask you about your disability. Like if you're blind, they cannot necessarily ask you if you have light perception or not. So there are things that they cannot ask you regarding your disability, and you also are not forced to disclose said disabilities. So be aware of those legal rights for you. I feel like it's important that you know that. But yeah, the I like the conversation, the little small exploration on disability disclosure. I think it's important. Um, Now for characters. I can't believe I've gone all this way without full spoilers. I love it. The characters are amazing. I mentioned how they are very much three-dimensional characters. I think Stella is amazing. Michael's great. I like how they have their own lives and their whole thing is not the romance. I love it. I really love it. I will be talking about a little bit of the romance in a minute because I need to talk about the romance now because I need to talk about certain other things that are brought up in reviews I want to talk about. I think two more things. Um, so the romance for the most part is amazing. I really like this romance. Um, it's a great romance. It's very cute, very sweet. One of my favorite parts about this romance is that it's not unnecessarily dramatic. A lot of romance novels that I have read tend to add extra drama for no reason. Literally. It's just no reason. It's just adding and adding and adding and adding and adding and adding. And it's just like, and the worst part about any drama they add is that a lot of the conflicts that come with those dramas, and with the drama they add and all that stuff, all of those plot lines, they are sacrificed for the romance. So what usually happens is it's there. They're like super, like, just dealt with really quickly because of the romance. So a really good thing, I think I mentioned about the Spanish love deception last Valentine's Day, is that they have a lot of things that keep getting added, and one of the things that, like, you know, that is added is at the end. Spoiler for the Spanish love deception, by the way, is that you find out that Aaron's dad has cancer, and they. Oh, where's my phone? Okay, hold on a sec, guys. This is a thing. Okay, let me just switch this so I can continue talking. But the point is, here we go. They find out that the dad has cancer, and then they just, like, totally gloss over it, and then you just find out, and then Aaron just forgives him. There's nothing about it. They literally just added it for no reason. And it was part of what, and they kind of just added it. The author kind of just added it to make Catalina just, like, take a flight and be be with him, because they have that third act breakup. Oh, I hate the third act breakup. I hate the way they every black moment just seems to be a third act breakup, and I'm just like, I hate it. And it's usually miscommunication and a bunch of fun stuff. So that's one of those things. I like that this romance specifically has minimal conflict. It's not the conflict is not, it's just minimal, very minimal, and it also makes sense. Any drama that is added kind of makes sense on a romantic level. And it's interesting. It's great. I love that there's minimal conflict, there's no drama, it's just the romance. Now, let's talk about two other things. Wait, was it one? I think about two other things that reviewers have mentioned, and I think it's important, actually, about three things that other reviewers have mentioned that I think is important to address. I do think it is important to address these things as someone with a disability myself, and I just want to give you my perspective. Again, I don't know how accurate this is to autism in general, but they kind of mentioned this generally, so they didn't. I don't remember them saying this directly about autism, so they seem to mention it generally as a disability thing. But again, I don't know how accurate this would be. I don't know how the if you wanted accuracy on autistic representation, find reviewers who would tell you that. But the thing I want to mention a couple of things that I think are really important to address. The first one, I mentioned the reviewer who mentioned the why Michael didn't know because of the whole because his cousin is autistic. This other reviewer also said that Stella's disability was mainly used as a plot device to create conflict. I want to say that I disagree with this, and the reason I disagree personally is because, again, Stella's disability just exists, and the conflicts that are added between both romantic partners that involve this Stella's disability make sense because of the way her disability impacts her. So no, it is not a plot device. It is one of those disability challenges. What I call disability challenges. Like, I have challenges with my disability, no clue. But, like, you don't know. I don't know if this person did not say if they would if they were ruined. I don't know anything about this reviewer, by the way. I don't. But the thing I want to say is that a lot of the conflicts that come up regarding her disability makes sense because of the way it impacts her, and the way that, and the impact usually comes in the way Stella understands and interprets the people and world around her. So it makes the conflicts make sense. Usually a lot of the conflicts become some form of misunderstanding because oh, hold on a minute, guys. I gotta call my mom back. Give me a sec. If I can get this. Okay. So anyway, yeah. So the conflicts that were brought up regarding disability, her disability, like in general, are understandable. They usually have to do with miscommunications, misunderstandings, and then, unfortunately, Michael's not good at apologizing, but most of the time. But the thing is that when Stella misunderstands something because of her disability, she usually apologizes and says, "Oh, okay," and it's just like that. That's all I'm gonna say about that, because it's not a plot device as much as it is the way that her disability impacts her. And I don't think that you can. I don't think you can always get this. I don't. Okay. As someone with a disability, I don't. I find that I don't think people who are able-bodied can always understand the challenges that we actually go through. So I feel like the reading that he had, like it was about device, it could be in certain stories, but I don't think it fits this story. So I wanted to address that. For the next thing that I want to address, there is I'm going to be talking about some possessive behavior briefly in for Michael. I'm going to talk about him, and it involves him as who he has possessive behaviors, and I will talk about this. So if you want to skip this part of the video, I'm sorry that I can't add timestamps, but yeah, just skip probably the next minute or two. If you don't want to hear about this. But, okay. Besides, one of the things, and by the way, spoilers here. One of the things that Stella discovers one of the things that happens in the book is, at first, it starts off, Stella's lesson plans start off with learning how to be better at sex. And Michael eventually does tell her that she really doesn't need that, and the reason that she wants to learn to be better is because she gets very stiff. Like, she gets, for good reason, in my opinion. Because she has a bit of not necessarily an aversion to touch, but she likes being touched when she initiates and allows. Which, girl, makes sense. Disability aside, that makes sense. Someone randomly touching you is weird. Disabled or not, it's weird. Even if they're family members, it can be kind of weird. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Please, I'm asking, I'm begging. So the things the thing that I want to say about that, though, is that, you know, she doesn't necessarily have an aversion to stuff. She just has a hard time with it, right? And a lot of the men that she has had sex with, or any sexual encounters with, or any dates with, you know, one of them was even kind of like, you know, loosen up or whatever. There's even a guy that outright says, "You'll just have to get used to me." And this is where, by the way, the harassment comes in with this dude and this sexual assault, where he's just like, "You'll get used to me." There's a forced kiss somewhere, and she feels terrible. And I'm gonna, yeah, it's bad. But I'm not gonna talk too much about this. I just want to talk about, without spoiling too much, Michael's possessive behavior. But basically, eventually, though, what happens is that Stella's plans change from learning to be better at sex to learning how to be in a relationship, and she gives Michael a new proposal where she tells him to be her practice boyfriend. So that's where we get the fake dating trope, which I think is so cute. She literally offers him. This woman has so much money that she's like about $50,000 a month. That's basically a year's salary, and I'm here going, okay. And he can't necessarily, uh, he can't really turn down her proposal. Like he can't afford to do it because his mother, um, I think she goes through chemotherapy because she has cancer, if I remember correctly. So he can't afford to do it because he has all these medical bills. And his dad was basically left them and conned her, and he has conned a bunch of people. So things like that, right? And so he can't afford to do that, right? So he does this, but eventually Stella realized reason she wants to do it is because she wants to find the perfect guy for her or whatever, right? She eventually realizes that Michael is the perfect guy for her, and she eventually changes her plan a little bit, where she doesn't tell him this, but she changes again, where she's like, I'm gonna use these lessons to seduce him, hopefully, um, and maybe that he will fall in love with her, I guess, right? So the thing is that Stella's summation is kind of correct, right? Michael would be a perfect love interest if it wasn't for his possessive behavior. And there are instances in the story where he starts becoming kind of possessive and controlling, and he starts being very he just starts he just becomes possessive, and he even acknowledges like I'm not her boyfriend or whatever. But there's very rarely an acknowledgement at the end that he even apologizes for his possessive behavior. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, actually, you know what, I wasn't going to talk about it, but I'm going to actually talk about it. So a quick warning for assault and harassment. So the character Philip does kind of harass Stella. It's low-key harassment, but it's still kind of harassment. But there's a point where Stella asks Philip out on a date. And apparently she is so bored by his conversation that she imagined something else, and she was smiling at the imagination, and he considered it encouragement and kept talking, and literally like her mind basically blurred out. There was no stimulation in that conversation. And by this time, her and Michael are kind of broken up because of things that happened at a party. Basically, I forgot to mention spoiler, but whatever. There's no way you can get through this long of a video without expecting some spoilers, right? But basically, there's a scene where I told them you just kind of have to get used to me or whatever. Like he tells her this. There's a scene where she actually wait, no, this doesn't happen after, but I do want to say that Philip is also as possessive of in a way as Michael to a way. But basically they do go on a date, but before this date happens, sometime before the date happens, right? I was wrong on the placement of the scene, but before this date happens, there is a point a little bit before the party where Stella is going to see Michael. They were gonna have, I think, lunch or something, and she was gonna go see him. And this is where he tells her, you gotta get used to me eventually. I guess he had this idea that they may be dating or whatever. And what he does, what Philip does is he forcefully kisses her in the parking lot, and it's obvious she's uncomfortable and hates it. And while she's comfortable with Michael kissing her, he usually does tell her, like, I'm going to kiss you. Like, he usually tells her, or she initiates, because she's not comfortable most of the time, right? And it is so bad. She feels so terrible. She drives away. She does all this stuff, and she goes into the shop where Michael works. She goes into the bathroom because she's really upset, where she goes very, very, very far enough that she starts washing her mouth out with water because she feels this uncomfortable. And Michael kind of comes in, and she tells him that Philip kissed her, and he becomes very possessive. Like, did you want to kiss her? Did you want to kiss him? Like, why did you let him kiss you? Michael, she said he kissed her when she didn't want it. He didn't say I kissed him back. He said he kissed me. And also, why would you write? Why would you let him kiss you when you why would somebody let him kiss you when you have no relationship with her? It's it's annoying. It's irritating. There are other instances like this where he kind of acts possessive over her, and they are very, very irritating. Philip also can. There's a point where he acted at least slightly possessive over her when Michael was trying to get her back. So he kind of sent her flowers every day. And one of the days I sent her flowers, she he tries to take her flowers, and she's like, but they're my flowers. He's like, I'll get you better ones. And I'm like, no. She's like, no. And this happens after the date that I mentioned earlier, because she went on a date with Philip. She asked him out even after he forces a kiss on her, because the reason that Stella originally wanted the practice to get better better help with romance and even sex in general was her mom basically saying, Stella, I want grandkids. Listen, moms or parents in general, stay out of your adult kids' lives and don't say, I want grandkids. That's none of your business. Like, what the? No, stay out of it. Stay out of it. Run away. But that's like the main reason. But also, like, eventually though, that part is acknowledged where Stella's was like, it's okay, honey. Like, I just want you to be happy. Which is at least good, unlike her dad, who doesn't apologize, and even if he intentionally was good, he was trying to be good. But basically, we have that scene, and it is not really acknowledged at the end. He doesn't apologize for his possessive behavior. Philip's harassment is not discussed or even barely mentioned. He just kind of, there's actually another girl that finds him kind of interesting. I don't know, it's very badly handled in this area. So I think that the viewer in this was right. Michael's possessive behavior is terrible, and it's the one problematic part of this romance. So yeah, so that is like the one problematic part of this romance. It does present masculinity in a bad way in this area. It does present a very toxic side of it, and it's weird to me because Stella seems to know when someone is trying to control her or when she's uncomfortable with something, and she doesn't acknowledge the way he's always behaving. It's like she forgives him by the end. And the reason she doesn't acknowledge this is plot? That's what I think. So it's very weird to me in this area, in this end. Like, that is also my one critique on the disability representation, that she seems to, in the book, my reading of the book was that she seems to understand when she's uncomfortable, and she seems to know when people are trying to control her and control the things that she does. She seems to understand that, and I don't see a reason she wouldn't acknowledge it. That's it. That's my critique. Another thing that another reviewer mentioned was that he felt that this romance was a bit of a lost opportunity, like almost like a loss of opportunity, where in they think that, you know, it's great that to have all this representation of an autistic woman and all that stuff, but he felt it was a loss of opportunity when all the ways that that Stella's disability impacted her were not explored, and that generally disability stuff was not explored. Listen, I disagree, because I do think her disability the impacts were very well explored, even if they weren't hitting you over the head. I don't know if you wanted it to hit you over the head, but I personally found the exploration okay. So for me, I didn't have an issue. But also, as I said in the beginning of this video, the nobody owes you a disability, and nobody owes you, as I said many times, like, nobody owes you a disability, just like nobody owes you a sexuality. But also, nobody, no genre owes you a full-on exploration of how certain things affect people. They really don't. I think in certain romances this would work, but it is very obvious to me that the author didn't necessarily, at least to me, I'm not speaking for author intention, but in the book it didn't feel like that the intention was to outright explore every single way that disability impacts Stella. And also, that's not why we always read fiction. Listen, I want to say this right now. I have my problems with the romance genre. Arguably, every genre has problems. All of them do. Not even arguably. Every genre has its issues. Every genre has its issues. All of them have some problem here and another. I will say, however, that I find that romance is the genre that I read that can be the most problematic. We have really toxic guys and really the possessive behavior from Michael is toxic, right? We have that. We have very toxic relationships portrayed as romantic, and a lot of it happens to be because and they just portrayed as good and romantic in both YA and adult romance novels. We also have the fact that romance is misleading, especially in the synopsis, where it will say that it's something like romantic or whatever, but you don't even get. But eventually realize that could be like a toxic relationship being portrayed. And the problem with this is that the author, especially with this last one, is that the authors don't usually do the bare minimum of at least giving you some trigger warnings and saying like, at least don't acknowledge that they're doing anything problematic in the books and say like, this is not good, this is a toxic relationship, blah blah blah. Nothing like that. So it can be very misleading when it comes to the synopsis. Think something like 50 Shades of Grey and after that, these synopses can be, especially for 50 Shades of Grey, it's very misleading. And they portray the toxicness as good. So yes, I have my problems with the romance genre, and I do think it can be literally the most problematic genre that I personally read. However, I think that the romance genre is unique in the fact that it promotes, the genre promotes joy, finding hope and joy through love. The genre is promoting that anybody can find happiness, and that it doesn't matter who you are and what your circumstances are. You can find happiness no matter those things. And that is what romance, though we have the bad things about it, that is what romance excels at. Which is why, even though I think it can be the most problematic genre I read, I do not hate romance, because I think it portrays, it at least attempts to promote a really good message of finding love and joy and hope. And I think that's a message we all need. And we definitely needed it in 2020, in the COVID and all that stuff, right? So I think overall it is it promotes good things, which is so that's one of the things I want to say about. That's like one of the reasons I still like romance, and I still want to read it. And while I can review bad romances, I also want to review good romances, and I want to read the better ones, like Casey McQuiston, Mason Deaver. Mason Deaver has written some interesting ones that I've read that I really liked. Who else? Elsie Rosen. I'm blanking on a couple. But the point is that yes, you can. They usually try to promote the best parts, the idea of being happy for everybody, and we have seen too much of disability struggles in stories, whether overtly or not. We have seen way too much of that. We have seen too many struggle stories. We have seen too many of the challenges being portrayed for disability. I think romance is a good starting point because it can also be very inclusive if the author chooses to be. I think that romance is a very good starting point to start presenting disability in a way where characters who have disability experience love, joy, and hope like everybody else. I think romance is a great starting point because it can be, like I said, it can be very inclusive. And if you have a um, if you have a character with disability experiencing joy, while the struggle stories are going to be there, we also can counterbalance them with joyful stories of them experiencing happiness. Because, trust me, life with disability, while challenging, is not always dreary and depressing like the struggle stories that we get. Not to mention that a lot of them um, are exaggerated struggles and inspiration porn and all that stuff, right? So I think it is important to be aware that, well, this romance wasn't trying to discuss all those subjects. And I do enjoy complex romances that discuss themes, like discuss difficult themes. But I think there's also a need for characters with disabilities to have a story where aren't there aren't themes of struggle being discussed and where they're happy. So as for the reviewer lamenting that this was not that these themes were not like talked about and explored, I think you're both wrong, and and you're also very I don't think you're bad at all, but I think that you're missing the point of the story, and it is about a woman with a disability finding joy and love. So that's what I think. I think you're missing the point of the story, but that's just my opinion. And the last thing mentioned is that a reviewer mentioned that they didn't like that. I guess they interpreted it that when Stella seems not to like something, Michael tells her you're going to like it, or that he does certain things that she originally started saying that it's uncomfortable, and that it seems like Stella's symptoms are fucked away by Michael. Now I disagree with the statement, and the reason I disagree with this is because I read it in a way that is like the reason, even if she might like something, or she's not, or some of the things that he does them in a way that makes Stella feel comfortable. There's a difference between your symptoms going away. Your disability symptoms will never go away, okay? Symptoms are like uncomfortableness doesn't necessarily go away. But there is something to be said about being comfortable around someone with a disability. I am not comfortable talking to all people. I'm very specific to the people I like to talk to, and I'm not comfortable talking about everybody. But those who I am comfortable with, I may be willing to try other things that may make me uncomfortable. And I think that's where Stella kind of, or her things kind of go. Like, there are things that she would apparently not always have done, but she feels secure enough and comfortable around Michael because of the fact that, he would stop if she doesn't like it. So, like, listen, Michael may have his problems with possession, but he is not Jacob Black. Think you understand, right? The jerk. I did not like Jacob in Eclipse, okay? I did not. So I think there is something to be said about being comfortable, and when you're comfortable around someone and you feel safe enough, you might do, you might try some things that you probably wouldn't try, and I think that's the way that's the way I read it. So I don't think necessarily her symptoms are fucked away or anything. If anything, they are. She is able to feel comfortable around him, and maybe they are. It mitigates the usual uncomfortableness that she would normally feel with the security she has around him. So that's what I think. So with this, we've kind of reached the end of everything I wanted to say. I don't know how long this video is because I've stopped at least twice. And this is like my third clip. So I don't know how long this is, but if you have stayed this long, because I've been recording for like an hour or so, if you have stayed this long, thank you for watching. Let me know your thoughts on the kiss quotient. I would love to hear them. And I would love to see them in the comment section because I want to discuss your thoughts because I had so much to say. Literally, this became one of my longest blog posts. Also, I mentioned it before, I mentioned it again, please go to my blog. I went in depth here, but I also go in depth on my blog, so you can read everything I wrote regarding this book on my in my blog. In case I missed something, I probably wrote it down. So those are my thoughts. Overall, I gave this book 4 stars. It definitely didn't feel like a 5-star, but it was a great read. I read it in 2 days. I had a great time. And I honestly, I don't, there are, while most of it is good, my critiques I think are the, are like, most of it is good. Some of the critiques are just that. So I like it. I appreciate it a lot. I think it was very fun. It was a fun read. I want to read The Bride Test and The Heart Principle, which are sequels to this. And I'll let you know my thoughts on those eventually. But let me know in the comment section your thoughts on the kiss quotient. I want to discuss. Hey, thanks for watching. So, what did you think of everything I had to say in this video? It was a lot, I know, but I hope you enjoyed it nonetheless. Consider subscribing to my channel if you enjoyed my content and turning on notifications so you're aware when I release videos. Remember that there is an accompanying blog post that is linked in the description if you're interested in reading that. Also, consider subscribing to my blog. That way, you can check out my written book reviews, but also some of my creative writing. And with that, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Until next time, consume stories. Bye.